Friars became popular during the 12th century AD due to a movement called the Mendicant Orders, which originally consisted of the Dominican and Franciscans. The word mendicant means to beg, and these were what the values of these friaries were built around. In medieval Britain there were three dominant religious orders for the friars. The Black Friars, who followed the Dominican order and were identifiable by their black hoods and cloaks. The Grey Friars, who followed the Franciscan order and, as the name suggests, wore grey. And later the White Friars, who followed the Carmelite order and wore white. This group established themselves later in England in around 1242, although it is important to note that other, lesser friary orders existed in medieval England during this time. The sole purpose of a friary was to cater for the poor. Originally, friaries were constructed to take care of old or frail priests and other members of the clergy who were unable to carry out their monastic duties either temporarily or permanently. But as the popularity and reliance on friaries grew, they began appearing in more populated areas to take care of people outside of the clergy as well. Medieval buildings would be set up in towns and cities where the poor would be welcome to come in and be taken care of, whether it be a hot meal, a bed to sleep in for the night, or medical issues that needed to be addressed. Friars could have many jobs, such as medical practitioners, therapists, surgeons, nurses, and general carers for the poor, the elderly, and the frail. To take it into modern terms, a friary would generally be seen as the medieval equivalent of a local GP, a hostel, a hospice, a food bank, and a homeless shelter, all mixed into one. Due to this, friars were seen as a vital pillar of society, who would often converse with the townspeople and be relied upon to take part in all local matters such as fair prices for food, tax, rent, and also campaigning for improving sanitation in towns and cities to prevent squalor and disease. People would come to have their ailments checked out and taken care of, while also be given shelter if they had nowhere to go. They would be fed and looked after, and friars would even appeal to the local government bodies to help the unfortunate with employment opportunities or a more permanent living space. Due to the multitude of roles which the friars carried out, medieval friaries could grow to be giant buildings, much like scaled-down city hospitals of today. Indeed, the word hospital comes from hospitality, which was the backbone of a friar's values. It was due to the upscaled importance of Christianity during this time, and the money of which it brought in, that helped these friaries continue for hundreds of years, as they could confidently rely on the funding of the church to continue being a cornerstone of medieval health and charity. Ironically, medieval homeless shelters, food banks, and free healthcare was funded more in the medieval period than in modern Britain today. Friaries would feature, most importantly, a parish church, feasting halls, office rooms, public bathrooms, libraries which would be filled with medical books, cloisters for reflection, gardening therapy and meditation, dorms for sleeping, surgery rooms, study rooms for research, and much more. As such, a medieval friary could often take the shape of a generic scaled-down cathedral or abbey, flanked by additional monastic buildings. But generally they were more free to change their layout to suit the existing medieval streets, and only required the church to be situated in the traditional east to west format. Not to mention that, much like the majority of medieval buildings from this time, friaries would be semi-self-sufficient, so would also own considerable plots of land for harvesting crops, growing herbs, allotments for fruit and vegetables, as well as keeping livestock such as sheep, pigs, chickens, and cows. Some friaries would even have enough room and money to afford giant tithe barns for storing supplies such as hay, vegetables, grain, wheat, and other commodities offered up by the local townspeople in lieu of the church tithe, which was the medieval equivalent of council tax. Friaries would also have stables either on-site or nearby the main establishment, as the life of the medieval friar could involve a lot of travelling for business meetings, to work as missionaries, and to steer horse-drawn carts to people's houses to pick up the sick or injured individuals, acting just like a medieval ambulance service. With all this, friaries would often have large undercrofts with spectacular vaulted ceilings to provide enough storage for the items required in everyday life for the friars. Friaries would also serve as schools, providing education for the less fortunate, who couldn't afford to attend the official schools and colleges, which were often rather expensive. We also commonly see cemeteries on the friary grounds. No doubt a convenient place to bury the patients who died in the hospitals, as well as a private cemetery for the monastic people who worked here. Medieval friaries would often be situated near the city cathedral, and the friars would help out at the cathedral at times, then work in the friary, with the priests and monks of the cathedral doing the same in return, whether it be to help run classes in the schools, consult on medical practices, offer counselling, or simply just lending a hand on construction and maintenance of the buildings. A rather impressive surviving medieval hospital is that of St. Cross just outside Winchester in Hampshire. Founded by Bishop Henry of Blois in 1132, with the original use being an almshouse, this building of the Middle Ages proves to be the oldest almshouse which continues to be in use for its original purpose. The 1130s were a tumultuous time in England due to a bitter conflict between Stephen of Blois and his cousin Empress Maud, who both claimed the throne. This rivalry led to an uneasy war across England, causing poverty, unsuccessful harvests, and a significant rise in the sick, frail, and the homeless. It was due to this that the Bishop of Winchester founded a hospital on the site of an existing religious house, which was said to be crumbling and in desperate need of repair. The new hospital had room to cater for 13 people on a permanent basis, with the capability to feed hundreds at the gates each day. Over time, the hospital grew in size due to increased funding, and alongside this came the tradition of offering the wayfarer's dole, which is where the keepers of the hospital provided bread and ale to passing travellers, a tradition that miraculously continues into the modern day. Known as a cathedral in miniature, the hospital's church is a beautiful example of late Norman architecture, which survives as the only original part of the 12th century site. Today, St. Cross Hospital is home to 25 people of the clergy, known as brothers, who live here permanently. You may spot them in their traditional red or black gowns walking around the monastic site. Intriguingly, some medieval leper hospitals still survive, as these were built outside of the city walls away from the local population due to the fear of leprosy spreading throughout the local community. The 900-year-old leper hospital of Norwich, called Lazar's House, and the ruins of a similar leper hospital in Dunwich, Suffolk, still survive into the modern day. Unfortunately, due to the constant evolving nature of towns and cities in Britain, coupled with the constant downscaled funding for these kind of charitable organisations, friaries rarely survive to today, with usually only boundary walls or perhaps a church remaining. King Henry VIII's Dissolution of the Monasteries Act in the mid-1500s cut all funding to medieval friaries, priories, abbeys and most cathedrals, and hence were forced to close their doors. In fact, the people who were responsible for selling off monastic property after the dissolution often targeted the infirmaries and hospitals, giving the poor and unfortunate nowhere to stay from now on. Many friaries were sold and repurposed as almshouses for the poor, however with much less support than before. Eventually, most friaries that weren't dismantled for construction materials such as wood and dressed stone were turned into workhouses. The medieval friaries who devoted their lives tending to the frail and unfortunate would surely turn in their graves if they knew what their dedicated places of work had turned into. Only a few medieval friaries remain in use today, with St Helens of Norwich still continuing its role by tending to the elderly to this very day, after originally opening its doors in 1249 AD by the Bishop of Norwich, making it one of the oldest medieval friaries still continuing its charitable duties. Today, take a walk down some of the streets in your city or town, and notice all the street names which include the word friar or friary. It is more than likely that a medieval friary was once established on that site. This video is part of a series where I will be explaining the roles that friaries, priories, abbeys and cathedrals had in medieval England, as I continue working to uncover and explore the truth of daily life during the Middle Ages, ranging from the domestic, artisan, religious, spiritual and military aspects that all contributed to bring medieval England into the realms of great legend, and how it continues to inspire people into understanding England's former glory as a medieval kingdom. But for now, thanks for watching.